Well, I think we're still waiting for people to log in, but as we are waiting, I would like to go ahead and welcome everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Chavis. I'm a senior instructor at the University of South Carolina within the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. And today we have a very exciting panel lined up for you featuring leadership topics for students that are joining us all the way to the seasoned professional. And I'd like to begin by introducing our moderator and panelists. So our moderator for the day will be Cathy Gustafson. Cathy Gustafson is an associate professor at the University of South Carolina within the School of Hospitality and Tourism Management. Cathy's been a raving fan of the Ken Blanchard companies, being first introduced to his leadership works during her time as a club manager in affiliation with the Club Management Association of America. Moving into academia, she emphasized many of the teachings of Ken Blanchard and has utilized many of his books within a variety of different hospitality courses. And then we have panelist Scott Blanchard. Scott Blanchard is the president of the Ken Blanchard Companies, the company founded by his father, Ken Blanchard. An accomplished author in his own right, the co-author of Leverage Your Best, Ditch the Rest, and Leading at a Higher Level, Scott represents the next generation of pioneering thought leadership on management issues. He is the co-author of Blanchard's newest training program, The First Time Manager, which teaches the essential skills that every new manager must master to succeed in the workplace. Scott's personal philosophy is based on what he sees as a fundamental shift occurring in the discipline of leadership, the movement away from a limited focus on an individual goal attainment toward getting things done and through others. He is passionate about leadership and his role within organizations and centers his presentations on research-based material. Scott is educated at Cornell University and received his master's degree in organizational development from the American University in Washington, D.C. Our next panelist is Ken Blanchard. In the past 3 decades, Ken Blanchard has authored or co-authored 60 books whose combined sales total more than 21 million copies. His groundbreaking works, including Raving Fans, The Secret, and Leading at a Higher Level, to just name a few. Universally characterized by his friends and colleagues and clients as one of the most influential and compassionate leadership experts in the world, Ken is respected for his lifetime of groundbreaking research and thought leadership. In fact, few people have influenced the day-to-day management of people and companies more than Ken Blanchard. Born in New Jersey and raised in New York, Ken received his master's degree from Colgate University and his bachelor's and doctorate degrees from Cornell University. So thank you everyone for your time today. For those of you that are joining us on the virtual panel, please feel free to ask any questions you may have during our time together in the chat box. We will have time at the end of our session for Scott and Ken to answer any questions that you may have. So with all of that said, Cathy, I am sure everyone within our meeting would love to hear your first question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. I have to say I'm absolutely honored and thrilled to have this opportunity. You both are heroes and I've read lots of your work, and students on the panel, alumni have as well. My first question, most of these are individual questions, but really the first one is to both of you. So I'll let you decide who wants to take it first, but where do you get the passion and the inspiration to teach people how to lead?
Well, I think that's something that happens. You know, I had some great opportunities for leadership when I was young, and I remember I won the president of the 7th grade. My father retired as an admiral in the Navy, and I came home all pumped up, and he said, "Well, congratulations, Ken. But now that you're a leader, don't ever use your position. Great leaders are great because people respect and trust them, not because they have power." And so that began my leadership training. And so that's how I got into it. And Scott, you got in early too.
I mean, I grew up in really around the kitchen table, listening to my parents or having them quiz me about how my behavior was maybe incongruent with the stated family values, which we worked out on the family offsite meeting, and we're up on the chalkboard in the kitchen. So it came early, and then I actually went to hotel school at Cornell and was on the restaurant side for for a good while. And then I joined the company when I was 28, after I'd worked for about 6 years in the hospitality business. And I, at that point, went back to grad school, and I've been doing this ever since. But I got some great opportunities, to experience great leadership, and also some leadership that wasn't so great. And I got a chance to do my own work, for sure. So it's an amazing thing, and it's a lifelong journey for sure.
Great. That's fabulous. Kindred spirits with a hospitality focus, but it's all about the people, isn't it? So Ken, this question is for you. We spoke a few minutes ago that one of the things that Jessica and I spend a lot of time doing is working with Augusta National Golf Club, that obviously puts on a fabulous Masters tournament. And the students, prior to their first experience working there, which obviously they're very focused on high service, are required to read your book, Raving Fans. And then we talk about it, they take a test on it, all that good stuff. It's probably one of my all-time favorites, but would you briefly describe how that book came about, and maybe spend more time primarily on the present, and basically, why do you think those concepts are still so applicable to businesses today?
Well, I met Sheldon Bowles, my co-author, through the Young Presidents Organization, and that's an organization young people ought to know about. You have to become president before you're 40 years old and have at least 50 people working with you and 5 million in sales. And Sheldon noticed, he lives in Canada, when gas became all self-service, he said, what a fabulous time to start a full service operation. So he started a company called Domo Gas, and he hired a bunch of young people and all ages, and dressed them up in red jumpsuits. And when you would go into one of his stations, it was like going to the Indianapolis 500 pit stop, somebody raced to the car and start, doing your windows, and somebody open the door and ask you to step out so they could dust bust the car, and somebody's giving you gas and all. And so he called that raving fan service, You didn't want to just serve people, you wanted to have them coming back and saying it's just unbelievable. And I think that's the goal at Augusta National. I mean, we've been there a number of times, and I tell you, the people that you interact with that are volunteers there, they are just amazing. They are so friendly. They are so willing to get you what you want and find a proper place for you to sit and all that kind of thing. And so I'm so proud that they're reading Raving Fans before they go there, because I don't know a place that has better service than Augusta National during the Masters.
Great, excellent. So he is the real live Andrew in the book, I guess, of the gas station. That's fascinating to learn. So Scott, I understand, as Jessica mentioned in the introduction, you co-authored the newest training program with the first-time manager. And obviously we have a lot of students plus younger alumni on the panel here. Could you speak to what are 2 or 3 essential skills that students should be developing while they're in college, or newly working into entering the workforce, and how they might go about best practicing those? Perfect.
Well, the first time manager program, and also we have another one that's Blanchard Management Essentials, teaches the same material. And we actually we based a lot of the material basically in 2 buckets. And one of them is on the 1 minute manager, kind of a modern presentation of the 1 minute manager. So there's 4 conversations that we teach people. And what's interesting about leading people, serving guests, working with coworkers, is our relationships are contained in our conversations. And so there's 4 conversations that we highlight, and basically the quality of your service and your leadership is evidenced by every conversation you have. And it's sort of like an at bat, and you get up and you either make a hit or you strike out, right? So it's either good or bad generally, and it really is that way. According to the research, things are either good or bad. We don't really evaluate our conversations based on a Likert scale. It's either a conversation that's useful or it's not useful. So the 4 that we focus on is, one is the goal setting conversation. which is a conversation about where are we going and what do we expect. And it's a really important thing because 100% almost 100% of performance is based on the clarity of the goal on the front end. And then there's two conversations that kind of work together. One is the praising conversation and the other one's the redirect conversation. So once we set a course of action, and you'll be doing that when the master's comes, this is the way that we need you to handle this particular service area during the week. You know, and these are the duties you'll be engaged in. The praising conversation is the it's going well conversation. Thank you. That's exactly what we see. I really appreciate that. And it's really kind of praising progress, praising performance. It's really about you got that right. If things aren't going well, then it's the redirect conversation, which is I observed so-and-so. What did you think? Or what happened there? You know, and versus reprimanding somebody, it's actually starts with the observation. And then there's an inquiry, a question about what did you think? And then there's a dialogue or how is that, you know, is that what we had talked about? Or is that, you know, that didn't seem to go well. What would you do if you had a chance to do it again? So it's having a dialogue about what went wrong versus the manager just kind of driving their agenda. And then the fourth one is the wrapping up conversation, which is amazing in the hospitality world and also like in places like manufacturing, which is let's have a wrapping up conversation at the end of a period, the end of a day, at the end of a shift, about how did it go? And it's an opportunity to say what went well and what didn't. So those four conversations, they happen again and again. We set the goals at the beginning of the day, reiterating what's important, talking about what's going to happen. You have those, it's going well, it's not going well conversations. And then the last one is that conversation around wrapping things up. And then the skills we teach, which are universal to all the conversations, are really powerful. And the first one is listen. Listen to learn. Listen to have your mind changed. Listen as a manager so you can learn something you didn't know. And then if you listen well, then you can ask questions, which are what-based questions, coaching questions, which is, and never why questions. Like if somebody does something that we don't like, if you say, why did you do that? You've just put that person on their back heels, and in their brain, they're going to start to move out of the frontal cortex, and they're going to move back to their lizard brain, and they're going to go back to fight, flight. I'm in trouble. My managers asked me, why did I do that? Because people come up with answers like, because you told me to, or because, and it's usually in the tone of like, instead of saying, what were you intending to do there? What was the approach you took to that problem? If you had to do it again, what would you do? What did you learn from that interaction? What went well? What didn't go well? What questions open up dialogue? Why questions put people on the defensive? Try it with a boyfriend or girlfriend. Try it with a spouse. Try it with a kid. What questions create this? Why questions create this? What questions open people up to talking? And then the last, and if you do those things well, then as the manager, you can actually tell the truth. And you can say, well, based on what we just talked about, I understand now, and this is the standard we're going for because that's not going to be good enough with all the volume of people we're having come in. Or we need to go back and kind of restate the way we're going to do it. Or maybe we need to get somebody else here for some more help. You can actually problem solve once you've done those other two. And then the last one comes from Dad right from the beginning is endorse, which is always ending the conversation, which is we just had a conversation around behavior, intention. It might have been spicy, but you know what? I have your back. You're going to be great. We've got really important work to do. I endorse you as a human being. The conversation about behavior is separate from, I mean you no harm. I have your back. I'm here to serve you. So those are kind of the breakdowns. And it's really cool because people, first-time managers, and you would know this from hospitality, Cathy, is the average time it takes a manager to get formal training is between 6 and 10 years into their career. And by that time, they've done a lot of damage in many cases. And what they found in a study in Harvard is that the first 2 years as a leader, you develop habits that serve as a foundation for your continued growth as a manager, or you develop habits which hobble your performance because those habits need to be broken and need to go back and relearn new habits.
Well, that's quite fascinating because I expect everybody in this audience that can probably think about some great examples and some not good ones they lived through. That's quite fascinating. That's great to hear, and wonder, why not start from the beginning, as you mentioned, in these programs and develop it for a lifetime. Ken, this next question is for you. As we're all well aware, the workplace now is multi-generational. A lot of research says 5 generations in the workforce, and you can argue is that 4, but nonetheless, it's multi-generational workforce, and not everybody sees things the same ways. So what are some suggestions you might offer to our audience as to how leaders today, especially new leaders, might be able to navigate it best?
Well, it's interesting is in the older generation, we were much more into hierarchical leadership.
Yes.
Look to the boss, and we're waiting for direction and all that. And the younger generation doesn't like hierarchical leadership. They want side-by-side leadership. They don't want your job, but they want you to understand that they like to contribute. And so the whole movement that I think you need to think about as a leader of multi-generation is how can you move to a philosophy of we rather than me? Because you want to really involve people in decision-making and all. And if you go to your people, you say, gee, what I want to talk to you about is what we have in mind, what we'd like to accomplish. And I need your help. I don't have all the answers. I'll share what I know, but I really want to hear from you, because if we're going to be in this, we're going to be in it. And the whole philosophy is 1 + 1 is a lot better than 2. And there's no I in the word team. So it's really about how do you involve people in a way that they can do that. So I just lost my picture. Can you still hear me?
Oh, I can hear you, and I can even see you.
Oh, okay. So I'll say, but why don't you pass that on to Scott, the next question? I'll see if I can get my picture back.
All right.
Well, we
Sounds
can
good.
see you just fine, Dad, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Yeah.
Hey, Mike.
So anyway, Dad, you're actually good. So unless you need to see us, but everything's working right now. So don't go. We don't want to lose you, actually. So
Yeah, they can see me, but I just can't see myself.
Okay, well, so
Scott, from a similar standpoint, and we can jump back to the multi-generational, but how would you encourage people who perhaps are not of the newest generation to best manage or lead those people who are just now entering the workforce? How do they need to embrace the younger generation?
So the research is very clear, and this is one of the shifts that I talk to with managers all the time. And like so many things, they go back to these old quotes that we were told growing up. It's a poor carpenter that blames their tools, and it's a poor leader that blames their people. And so one of the things that the research is crystal clear about, and this was originally done when I saw it from a guy named Chip Espinoza wrote a book called Managing Millennials, and we've done a lot of work with this, is that the managers that are effective at dealing with people that are younger than them by a generation or even 2, now we got Y generation and next coming, is their mindset. And we talk about mindset and skill set all the time. Is their mindset is, it is my job to basically lean down and adapt and learn the needs and the wants and the values of the generation of the people that I am leading and are serving, and I'm serving, and to cater my leadership style, my approach to their generation. The old model is I'm the boss, and so it's your role to adapt to me because I'm in charge. And so even if you go back to the beginning, what's the question is the sheep there for the shepherd or the shepherd there for the sheep? And ultimately, the sheep is there to take care of the shepherd. And if he keeps them alive and takes care of them, gets them through the night, then they will be providing what he needs to take care of the sheep and his family. But it's not the reverse. And so as a leader, you are there to clarify where you're going, but you are there to enable your people to do the job. And there's no chance then I know that Cathy, you alone can do all the work that's going to be needed to be done at Augusta. Everybody has to, you're going to be enabling and leading everybody there to actually deliver that service. So we need to have that same mindset. And so what's happening right now is we're seeing a big split. And whenever I hear somebody make a complaint about like the younger generation or whatever, I refer, there's an article that I have, and I've got it on a PowerPoint. It's written with complaining about the laziness and everything of the next generation. And it was written in 1915. Right. And you get into your 50s when you start complaining about the generation that's coming behind you. And I believe that the young people, of which are many are my kids, they are our future. You guys are our hope. This is where we're going. And if I'm sitting there feeling like, there's some kind of a problem with you all individually or collectively, it's because I have not walked a mile in your moccasins. I have not gone that. And what my dad said is true, is that the especially started with the Y generation, is the way that things are set up is they're horizontally oriented. I'm an X generation, more cynical, but the Y generation is horizontally oriented, and they have a posse that comes with them of all their friends that they're connected with online and also in person, and they grew up with the internet, and so the answers are through Mr. Google and my means to get those answers met, and no longer are we looking up for permission or necessarily for affirmation. And so a lot of leaders my age and so are offended by that, but that's crazy because you're basing our, your worry or your concern on values that are of a prior time. And so it's always about adapting and connecting and having the back of the people that you're leading. And if you do it properly, then you earn permission to drive them to higher levels of performance and accountability than they would ever achieve on their own. But it starts with leaning down and adapting first. So that old model, it just doesn't work, which is like, I'm the boss, respect my position and adapt to me. It's just that's not the way that things work anymore. And if you're wishing that it was the 80s again, then that's trouble because, or the 90s. I mean, things have changed. And the best leaders have changed, and the ones that haven't adapted, they're the ones that are guilty of blaming their people rather than looking in the mirror and seeing what's going on in terms of their leadership.
That's excellent feedback. And I'd love to see that 1915 article, because I think we all find ourselves, second guessing things, and time changes and marches on. You've got to adapt. Ken, can you see us? Because we can see you great.
Okay, I can see you.
Excellent. So obviously we have this wonderful pandemic show up and throw a few curveballs in everybody's directions. And I'm wondering if there might be, if you could speak to leadership post-pandemic, are there things that we learned from the pandemic that leaders should be adapting to or, utilizing? How was leadership basically affected from the pandemic, but in a post-pandemic, how can leaders operate better?
Well, first of all, right before the pandemic, Scott became president of our company. And as you could see, my wife, Margie, and we co-founded it. It wasn't just me. In fact, Margie was the president of the company initially, because I'm a head cheerleader. Margie but we're so proud of Scott taking over and what he's doing. And our daughter, Debbie, is head of marketing, and Margie's brother, Tom, who was born when she was a freshman at Cornell, he's our CEO. So it's a kind of a family-run company. But one of the things that's really clear with the pandemic is that people are working from home so much more. In fact, we're trying to rent one of our big buildings, because we can't get people to want to come on in. But I think one of the important things for you to remember is, even though you might not see people face to face, you need to stay in contact. And one of the things that we started a number of years ago that's really powerful is that you ought to have a meeting with each of your direct reports for 15 to 30 minutes, at least once every 2 weeks at a minimum, and you schedule the meeting and they set the agenda. They can talk about anything they want. They can talk about a sick kid that might be impacting their work, and they talk about a goal that they want. But Peter Drucker told Scott and I years ago, nothing good happens by accident. Put some structure on it. And so one of the things now with the pandemic and people working at home is you need to have some structure. You need to have some set times to interact with people about what they're doing, what their career aspirations are and all. And the one-on-one has been an important addition to our whole philosophy. But if you're gonna be we, not me, you gotta communicate. And it doesn't mean today that it has to be all face-to-face, although it really is good once in a while. Scott called a special meeting in December of all of our people around the world, over 250 people. And some of them have been working with us a number of years and never been to the corporate headquarters. And it was really fun for them to come and join. Wasn't that, Scott?
It was.
Yeah. So
Scott, can you elaborate, take that really and kind of run with it, in that in the hospitality industry, obviously, or really service industries, some positions are able to be remote, but of course we need people in the physical plant, the physical hotel, the restaurant, or whatever the industry is, and yet there is this desire to work only remotely or from home or removed. So how might you or offer suggestions to leaders on how to be more enticing to come into the physical plant and the benefits of being face to face at least some of the time?
Well, it's an interesting time, isn't it? I'm a member of the California Restaurant Association, and I have a lot of accounts within restaurant. I've done a bunch of stuff for the Club Managers Association over time. I just have a deep love for it. And what's really been interesting in the whole process is watching, what happened when the lockdown occurred, but then how did the hospitality industry, rebound in a way, and also kind of go through the ebbs and flows of we're open, we're closed, we're open, we're closed, all that sort of a, thing. And there was one of my clients, for example, I'll answer your question this way, that they're a fast casual business and they're high-end fast casual, and they never had contemplated, to-go orders, other than if I'm going through the thing, I might build a to-go order as I walk through this high-end cafeteria sort of a setting, with the chefs there deciding your entrees and your sides and all that. I could take something home, but generally it was to be consumed there. And then the pandemic hit and they had to turn their whole business on its head to actually begin to figure out how can we actually create a takeout menu? How can we order something that changes every day? How can we enable people to do it on their phone and do it quickly? And by the way, do it so quickly, but also adapt to the ADA, because out here, we've got people that are running around looking for websites that are out of ADA compliance and, bringing PAGA suits, right? So it was really, and they figured it out, right? And they were like, they had to figure out the deal with Grubhub and DoorDash and the economics and all, and they figured it all out. And then dining came back. And then the big thing is, how do we run the restaurant for some diners who are coming in with masks and are nervous at lower numbers, but then we're still running basically a cash and carry takeout business on the side. So they actually had to figure that one out. How do you staff that? Sort of a thing. And then now they're back and they have full dining room going on, but then they've also got this full business they never had, which is this high-end takeout business where people got used to bringing a nice meal home to the family, right? And so they've had to really adapt. It's very similar in the hotel, end of things as well. And so I think what's been great about the industry is there's been this resilience, but it's never been an office-based industry. It's never been an industry where you're going to work remotely. You can't serve a guest remotely unless they're having a remote experience. And what I love about the restaurant industry, especially, is in California, #1 industry where people have their first job, mine included.
Yes.
#1 industry where somebody that's an immigrant to the United States can get that works. #1 industry where somebody didn't go to college or somebody that's an immigrant can get a job managing people. It's the center of every scene. It's the #1 generator of sales tax in this state and probably in South Carolina as well. and it's perceived as this industry that's they're making money hand over fist, but it's a hard industry to make money in.
Right.
It's really a labor of love. And so I think it's a beautiful place to be if you like it. And then probably the biggest choice for everybody, I think, it's not exactly a remote question, but the big question, and I got the answer when I left and joined this company and years ago, is you can make a great life, but one of the realities is you generally work when other people are enjoying themselves, and then you enjoy yourself when other people are working, in broad strokes in the restaurant, unless you work in a hotel in a city that's more of a, like a convention type hotel. But if you're working in the food service end of it or in the resort side of things, you're generally working nights, weekends, and your days off are Monday and Tuesday. And, but it's a great field. I miss it because you put it away when you go home at night and somebody else runs the next shift, but it's not for, for everybody. And I think it's been an interesting thing with the remote deal. Our business is, we were doing 5,000 face-to-face training sessions before the pandemic hit. 15% of what we were doing was virtual. We didn't do a face-to-face session for a year and a half. And now we're back to about 40% virtual, about 60%, about 40% face-to-face, 60%, pretty consistently virtual like we are today. And I don't think it's coming back. And we're like a restaurant that's got the takeout, Grubhub, Uber Eats line going on. And we've also got people coming in the door. And that means you better figure out how you're going to run your kitchen, because you can't run both sides of the house through the same line.
Right. That creates a lot of need for
Yeah, so
adaptability and flexibility and leadership there too.
But it's a really interesting question, because I'm not sure what your thought is on this specifically, but the hospitality industry is always there. It's vibrant, it's coming back, but it's been beat up as hardly as almost any industry, except for maybe theater. Movie theaters, which are just inching back as well. Because of Netflix and now the way we consume so much of our content in our homes with our feet up.
Very true.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great insight. Ken, I know there are a lot of professionals in our audience, and I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is, how do they evaluate success in leadership? I mean, do you have some advice as to what if you're running an operation, how do you, obviously we could look at finances, but internally in your soul and your heart and your guidance, how do you evaluate success in leadership?
Well, I think one of the key things, Cathy, is to ask your people. Ask them, how am I doing? What do you want me to do more of? What do you want me to do less of? What do you want me to, keep doing? And I'll constantly get feedback. Jimmy Blanchard, I mentioned, who was president of Synovus, and he's been really key down at the Masters. And they won the best company to work for so many years. We're fortunate they asked him to stop applying, and they created an all-star list with them at the top of the list. And what he would take was 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, love is patient, love is kind, and all. And he put that into a questionnaire. And every year he would say to people on a 1 to 10 scale, how would you rate me on these different variables? Because I want to really, if this is the way you're supposed to act as a leader, do it. So he would get feedback. Feedback, as I said, is the breakfast of champions. So keep on asking how you're doing and getting help and all that kind of thing. And in terms of evaluation, there's 2 aspects. A lot of times people think that the reason of being in business is to make profit. No, profit is the applause you get for creating a motivating environment for your people, so they take good care of your customers, and then they become raving fans of your organization. That takes care of the profit. But when it comes to your people, you want to ask them, in terms of how they're doing in terms of their performance, and how they're doing in terms of their attitude and feelings towards you and the organization. So you're constantly getting feedback and wondering how people are doing, and then saying, how can I help? and all that. We're in this thing together. So down at Augusta, they people come in there, they already know that, God, this is like going to Disney, if not beyond Disney, you know. And how can we really reach out to our fans in a way that they say, wow, not only is the course beautiful and the tournament great, but I've never been treated better.
That's fabulous, because it's a full loop, isn't it? To have the leader engage in the people and get that feedback. So Scott, could you speak for a couple of minutes to future trends you might be seeing in leadership? Or I know that's a big umbrella kind of question, but is there something on the horizon you think or perhaps it's already here, that's especially important for members of our audience to make sure has checks and balances they're doing in their leadership of others?
There is, yeah. It's kind of like the way that we do business, is that every business is not a digital business, but we need to learn how to transact business digitally, you know, and that's to be part of the solution. And so I just typed an answer into one of the questions. But the reality is that the managers generally have less face-to-face time than they ever did before. And in many settings where there's a hybrid, where people are working from home or they're coming into work, that's really putting managers in a more challenging position. And they're having to learn how to both create focus and clarity for people. That's one side of leadership. And the other side is to get people to be hooked in emotionally. So you build trust with them, and you also create support and inspiration. And the emotional side of things is more important than the direction or job side of things, but they both have to be tended to. And when they both have to be tended to virtually, it puts a lot of pressure on the manager to figure out how to do that over mediums like we're using today. And so what the research is showing is that the dynamics don't change. You just have a medium that's less effective at doing that. And so what it's requiring is for managers to figure out, how do I create buy-in? How do I build a relationship with people? How do I find out about their family, about their spouse and their kids, and what they want to, you know, what's important in their life away from work when we're on Zoom all the time? You still have to figure that stuff out. How do I share things about my life in a way that is still transacted that way? So the digital part is not going away. And in fact, a lot of management interactions now are text-based by design within restaurants and hotels. And my son works at a large luxury movie theater. They all have their cell phones on, and they text them throughout their shifts about which theater to go and where. And so it's changed. Mm-hmm. You know, and so the digital thing is here to stay. It's harder for people that didn't grow up that way, and it's quite native for people that are younger. You know, and I've got kids that range from 24 to 33, very native for them. My nephew, who's 16, he just as soon text me across the table yes. as he would interrupt the conversation, right? Or use WhatsApp or use Slack or something else. You know, something like that, not email generally. So the digital thing is here to say, so the relationship is not digital, but we are transacting business digitally. And so we need to figure out how to do that. And one last thing, one of our clients, about 85% of the issues they had between employees and managers centered around upsets from written communication, emails, Slack, Teams messages, or texts. And so it's really easy to bang out a rude text. If you've ever gotten a text and somebody wrote something in there and you took offense by it, and then you saw them later and you found out that they meant no offense by it, they just did it quickly because there was POS, parent over shoulder, or whatever. That is, people infer a lot from the written word. And so you need to get really careful about it. And then the big thing I've learned is, do not share negative messages over text or email. Don't do it. And if you otherwise, it's just going to come right back and haunt you. If you need to have a difficult conversation with people, say you need to have a conversation around something that's spicy or something that's important or whatever, but do not try to deliver that kind of information in writing. It will come back and haunt you. And if you get it wrong, it might be the thing that might show up in court or in a file. So you got to really be careful about what you write to a coworker, to an employee, to some superior in the company, to a customer for sure. So the written word is not the place to do something that should be handled, person to person, voice to voice. Better to wait than actually to try to use that medium to deliver negative information.
Oh, that's quite fascinating. So we've reached the time that I'm supposed to pass the baton to Jessica so she can facilitate asking you all questions from the chat box. So.
Well, and y'all could go on all day and I could listen to you all day, but I will tell you, we also have a great audience that is listening, and we've got some smart cookies that are asking some questions. So Ken, this is kind of an overwhelming question that I keep reading over and over in our chat box. And it's, if you had to revise Raving Fans and had to add another principle to customer service and providing customer service, would you add a different principle to Raving Fans?
Well, I think I would get to what Scott was talking about earlier, is to recognize that it's not all face-to-face anymore. It's both, online and all, and that you need to learn how to communicate in both spheres. Because it really is important, and because and it's neat. You can communicate with your people so much more now, too, because you can just drop them an email and say, I'd just love to talk to you for a few minutes, and they don't have to travel anywhere or anything and all. But also, it's good to have them face to face periodically, so you can really be with each other, because it's a very different experience.
This could be for either one of you, but you have both mentioned family several times as you were talking. So that is obviously of importance to you in your obviously personal and professional life. And I've had a few students ask questions that are very similar to Megan. And Megan asked, how do you take care of yourself so you can take care of your team, and so your team can take care of your customers? And I think that just speaks a lot of volumes, right? So as young professionals, what can they do?
I can take a response to that. So if you are not taking care of yourself, it's virtually impossible to serve and take care of others, and it's hard. And if it's the idea about being actually, selflessness requires that you be selfish to a certain degree around things like getting sleep, keeping hydrated, having enough glucose in your system, and actually having some habits and some opportunities for you to balance action and reflection. My dad talks about frenetic activity is just the killer, because then we fire into things and we do things that aren't working. And so it's a really tricky thing. And it's one of the things that we're dealing with in this country right now, even in our business, is how do you, with blurred boundaries and everything's 24/7, everybody's got these, how do you actually separate one from the other? And it really requires, some individual discipline, because if you don't figure out a way to get your own needs met and take care of yourself, it's really, really hard, to serve other people. And so whatever strategies you can do to make that happen, and sometimes it's being radically selfish, to take the time that you need so that you can be prepared to actually take care of the people that you're going to be in service to. And so my wife studies, she got a degree in neuroscience as it relates to leadership. And some of the advice she has is do the hard things first in the day. We only have so much capacity in the frontal cortex, and the frontal cortex is where we learn how to know when to bite our tongue. And when the frontal cortex goes away, because it wears out, that's when we say things that we regret. The other one is plan your day the night before. You only have so many resources in your frontal cortex. So do those things on the front end. Put your clothes out, plan your day, look at your calendar, talk to your spouse or your roommate, get your act together late in the day so you walk into the day without burdening yourself with having to organize yourself first thing in the morning. It's one of those reasons why making your bed, preparing your space is such a good way to get going with the day. And so often we don't take care of those things because there's only so much you can do up here. So if you don't take care of yourself and have strategies to do it, you're going to be in trouble. And the other one is take your time off. You can't be a hero. And if you're sick, don't go to work. We know that now. We didn't know that before, but now if you're sick, don't bring it to work and make sure that you take your time. So there's no easy way to say it, but if you don't take care of yourself, you cannot serve other people. And then what you're doing is really failing them.
Yeah, I love that.
Just to comment on that is that I think when you wake up in the morning, you got two selves. You got a task-oriented self and a thoughtful, reflective self. And which one wakes up quicker? It's a task-oriented self. The alarm clock goes off. A friend of mine, John Ortberg, says, why don't we call that the opportunity clock rather than the alarm? Boom, you're in task. And so what I like to do, and I get up, is first sit in the side of the bed, as Scott is saying, and think about the day. And, how do you want to be there this day? What are the things in front of you and all? And just have a little reflective time before you leap out of bed into your task. Otherwise, you're gonna just run yourself into the ground.
I built that into my wife, and I get up. If I have to be somewhere at 7 a.m, I get up at 5, and I spend 45 minutes drinking coffee, sitting down, and just like getting myself ready for the day. And then I go on, and I'd rather forego sleep to have that period of preparedness than wake up, at the last minute, jump in the shower and be running down the street drinking coffee. It does not set you up well for the day. It actually generates a lot of adrenaline, which needs to be processed through your system. And then when you start to get rushed, it also creates cortisol in your brain, which is something that's a hormone that's causing us to watch out for danger. And we are not at our best selves when we have adrenaline and cortisol in our system. And so taking the time to reflect, think about what's important, think about the kind of person you want to be today. One of my values I was sharing with some employees today is I've got a value for kindness. My dad and my mom are very kind. I'm not naturally, but I value it, and I work really hard to not do things that are unkind to myself and to other people. And that all starts from actually giving myself some runway to get into the day, because almost every time I misbehave or do something that I wish I could take back, it's out of haste or a lack of preparedness. And so there's kind of generally two kinds of people in the world. There's people that are more likely under stress, like drivers, to rear end other people, to have regrets of doing too much too fast, and they want to take things back. But there's other people that their regrets are regrets of omission, or I wish I would have. There are more people that have more of a tendency to get, it's almost like driving to get rear-ended, and so whatever your tendency is, just make sure that you do some reflection. So if you really need to speak up today, prepare yourself to advocate for what you need so you can speak up. If your issue on my side is it's more likely to overspeak, and prepare yourself to calm down so that weakness that shows up isn't going to derail what you're doing. Because most of us do the same thing that gets us in trouble again and again in our lives. And it's either doing too much or not enough. And then afterwards, you're either regretting not doing something or you're regretting overstepping.
We're in golf tournament world right now, so that Cathy and I both really needed to hear that. So thank you for that. Another question that keeps coming up, because again, we do have a lot of students who are listening into y'all, is they are preparing for internships. They're preparing for graduation. They're going into all of these interviews that they already believe are shaping their future for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of questions of what do you both look for in a new hire and someone for an entry level or management level type of position, and what should they start developing now as college students?
Yeah, let me throw one thing out and then have you add to it, because you'll like this. I teach kids at Cornell. It's a class that we teach when kids, but they're actually preparing to go out into the workforce. And one of the things that they're often doing is they're considering, where they're going to work. And so one of the things that we do is we teach them the things that we wish we would have known during that time. So I'll give you 2 tips. Okay. One of them is get really curious about the person interviewing them, you, and ask them some questions about themselves, about what them led to the industry, and like act like you're interviewing them. Because most of the time we're interviewing people and they don't ask us a darn question about ourselves. And if you want to get the job, you just start getting that, you ask that person questions about how did they end up here? What did the path look like? What advice might you have for me to get to in a position like you? And actually become really fascinated with and trying to figure out what can I learn from this person who's interviewing me? That's one. And then the second thing is be prepared for this question. Why should we hire you versus the other 43 kids that are smart here? And have a well thought out answer that talks about your values and what you believe and how you were raised and what your aspirations are. So you have an answer that you've rehearsed in advance for the question of who are you is what they're really asking. Who are you? And why should we ask you? What's in your heart? What's in your soul? Like, well, that's what they're asking. And if you have an answer around that, and we do in our course, we teach it's called Leadership Point of View, which is to develop an answer to that question, because that's what they really want to know. And that's the basis with which you'll get a question, which is the degree to which you're curious about them. And the second thing is you know who you are, and you can respond to a question more than, I'm not sure. Because it's not about what you know and what you've learned, but it's about who are you and where you're going that they want to know.
I love that.
So what would you add to that, Dad? Because I think that is they want to hire a person. They don't want to just hire, and there's a million, people that are prepared for the job, but it's about that person that they want to know, their heart.
Yeah, I think they really want to know where your values came from. Scott was talking about leadership point of view. One of the first questions is, who impacted your life in a positive or a negative way that has determined, who you are? And I think that's a really interesting question to ask, and the big picture, I think, in all of this is be a lifetime learner. I always say to people, when you get a job, don't keep your head down and grind it out, do your job, but always look up for opportunities, things to learn and all, and don't be settled. I just celebrated the 62nd anniversary of my 21st birthday, and I'm still trying to say, what can I do to learn more? What can I do to contribute and all? Because in the old days when my parents were around, they all headed to Florida when they were in their 60s, and all. And now we're sort of still saying, Margie and I, how can we make a difference? What can we do? Is there anything we need to learn more of? And so it's exciting. Life is a very exciting thing if you're a constant learner.
I love that. So I have another question that was asked very close to the beginning, and I think that this is impactful for anyone who is trying to provide customer service. But Daniel asked, a lot of raving fan ideologies involve putting yourself out there and being a bit extroverted. What recommendations do you have for those who are naturally introverted to still provide an above and beyond customer service experience?
Good question.
I'm telling you, we got some smart cookies out here.
Well, let me say that the language I use is a preference for introversion versus a preference for extroversion.
Mm-hmm.
So I myself, I think everybody's got the ability to do both. So, in terms of, I've got two children with a preference for introversion, and it's a really important thing to not label ourselves and paint ourselves into a corner, because as human beings, our language has meaning and it actually changes the way that we see the world. Number one, and what I actually believe is that what people are looking for with a service setting is really 3 things. Number one is they're looking for, the product or service that they expect. And then the second thing they're looking for is somebody that's delivering it in a helpful, and a service oriented, really in a gracious way. And I think the biggest thing that you're trying to do, regardless of your style, is to understand how you can avoid the 2 things that are killer or avoid one thing and then make the other one happen is disappointment and actually create delight.
Mm.
So one of the biggest things about service is about, I walk into a service context and I have an expectation. And my expectation, if my expectation is not met, then I'm going to be disappointed. But if I have an expectation and all of a sudden I get way more than I expected, that's delight. And they're both emotional conditions that actually create an experience that causes us to remember what that experiences look like. So most people are looking for, somebody that's actually with them eye to eye, and they're delivering the service, they're delivering it with the right kind of attitude, but they're managing and they're understanding disappointment versus delight. I'm going to give you one little quick one. When I was a manager, and they didn't pay us much. And one of the things I got for kind of my extra perks was I got to be the head waiter in the goods section on Friday night and Saturday night. And so I was manager during the week. And one of the things that I knew was I had a couple items on the menu that were no good, right? And I wouldn't let people order them in the most polite and respectful way. And I had talked to the chef about it, but I was just like, we're not known for that. I would really steer you away from that unless you're, or I would just sometimes walk up and say, I'm trying to create an opportunity for you guys need to get this item because it will blow you away. And even if it's a share, just get it. And if you know what's really great, lead people through it, because then you're creating a delight that people wouldn't have expected coming in, and you're steering things away from things that inevitably are not going to work. So I think that everybody wants you to be you, and so if you're not really preference for extroversion, don't try to be that person. And then sometimes the people that have the preference for extroversion, they don't get as many tips because they spend too much time talking and not allowing the guests to enjoy what they want. So you have to read the room. To really read the room. Some people don't want you to be inserted in the experience. Other people, they really like it. And, sometimes extroverted service is not what we want. We've had enough of it. We want to just, get on with the, enjoying the experience.
Love that.
Mhm.
Ken, there is another question that just keeps popping up, and it's, I think, because again, our students just read Raving Fans, and we just had some big discussions about it. And what came up in class and what's also coming up in this chat box is your concept of the +1%. Can you talk a little bit about the +1% and why it is of importance and how they can really epitomize that value?
That's a concept that Sheldon Bowles came up with, when he started his Domo gas station, and he said, you want to give them what they want, but what Scott's saying is that +1 is just a little bit more than they anticipated, so people expect you to wash their windows, but they don't expect you to ask them to step out and dust bust their car, or or bring them a drink, of water or what have you. What is it, that little extra that you can add to what you're doing with people, that they'll go, wow, that was really interesting. I never expected that. So
Yeah.
the +1 is just a little more than people anticipated. Don't you think, Scott?
Well, yeah, and the other thing that happens is if in a while, in the beginning, when a lot of the customer service stuff really started coming up, at that point is people were kind of out doing each other in terms of what they could throw at the customer when they had time to, and they were actually creating inconsistency. It's like, wait a second, that guy waxed and washed my car last time. Now you all just cleaned it, because what they do is it creates a potential disappointment down the road because of uneven standards. And so what you're trying to do is to do that little extra thing that's usually a personal touch. And so then incrementally things keep getting a little bit better. But there was these sort of like heroic things that were happening, almost like rogue heroism that was actually ended up not being repeatable. And then people would feel like there was, through no fault of anybody's intention, we created a less than experience between one service provider, and another. So it's just that little extra, which is usually a personal touch, remembering somebody's name, remembering an important detail, noticing something that's not being said and maybe asking them about it. just a little something that puts that personal twist on it.
Well, it is 3:31, so I know we are technically out of time, and I know that you two are very busy individuals, but I would just like to thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. Just a very personal aside, very quickly, Cathy, I was a student of Cathy's before I started working here, and she spoke about raving fans and all things Ken Blanchard books every time she taught a class. And I obviously read them, because when someone tells you all these things all the time, that you should read them. And in my very first interview, my big girl manager interview post-college, I had a manager ask me in the interview, in the book Raving Fans, what principle can you use that resonated with you the most, and how are you going to use that here at my club? He did not ask me if I read the book. He did not ask me to read the book beforehand. He just assumed that I would have read it because I was going into quality customer service industry. So thank you for creating an industry that really looks at the importance of the customer and the importance of interaction and communication, as well as leadership principles. So thank you for that.
You know, just a quick addition that you might want to think about is it goes hand in hand with raving fans, gun ho.
Yeah.
And after raving fans came out and people said, God, that's great for the customers, but how do we gun ho our people so they really want to do that extra mile that Scott was talking about? And so they kind of go hand in hand, gun ho and raving fans.
Well, I have not read that one, so now I have something on my list for this weekend. So
Right.
thanks for that.
Right. Yeah, you'll enjoy it. It's fun.
Awesome.
That is one of my favorites, but also well done. So kudos to you all and I understand your wife is heavily involved in creating some of these, concepts that we've all gotten to read about. So kudos to her as well, but thank you so much.